or at a deserted beach. They discuss news, novels, recipes, drink wine, listen to rock and roll, circle their wagons for a cozy night's sleep. Glad they got rid of that outlaw poet. One of the reasons I include that is that one of the questions that I get asked is, how do you come up with artwork? What's the source? Where do your ideas come from? And as far as I'm concerned, a rant is as good a source as any. So if you don't give yourself permission to do a rant, you could. Whether you show it to anybody or anything, that's up to you. But you know, it's got energy in it. And that's one of the things I want to talk about in a little bit, is about the energy. So we all have many talents. I occasionally write a poem. They're not great, but you know, it gets it out there.
Do you want the slides to change again?
Just in a moment.
Okay, just say next and Kim will do that for you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'm saying that we have many talents. As I said, the first art thing I remember is fourth grade. There was a county-wide art contest, and my mother was an elementary art teacher, so she rounded up people to do things for this contest, including me and my brother. I was in fourth grade, he was in third grade, and we went down to the county contest. And I had made a little goat out of paper mache, and I painted him purple. And for his goatee, I used binder twine. So it was, you know, the perfect little goatee. And I don't remember what my brother did. So we had him in this contest, and the judge was some other art teacher. And when my mother went around to see who had won ribbons, we didn't get any. And we were clearly the best of our grade, you know, in the show. So she asked the art teacher who was judging, and he said, oh, well, they didn't do these by themselves. Kids in fourth grade and third grade can't do that good artwork. My mother was furious, because not only had he insulted us in our artwork, she called her a liar. So she had a few words with him, very polite, I'm sure, and he awarded us honorable mentions. So I think that was one of the beginning of my starting to not believe authority, perhaps, because when I was in junior high, I found the word iconoclast. And I said, oh, a word that I can identify with. Iconoclast literally means breaker of icons. So there's been that streak through my work. So I'm going to put up the next slide. After graduate school, I went to work for a publisher in Iowa City. And I did probably, I'm guessing 35 books for them. This was one of the first, we started on this whole series of ethnic cookbooks, but this was the first one. We had all these great recipes from our 4th of July picnic. So we gathered them up, and I did my Grantwood imitation for the covers. Next. I did a series for Penfield of all calligraphy, and mostly calligraphy. So this is the first Scandinavian proverbs in which it's all calligraphy and all hand drawn. Next. This is the back cover. This is a real simple technique, you know, blowing ink around and making a tree out of it. Next. This is inside one of the calligraphy illustrations. Next. Danish proverbs, again, is all hand drawn, and this uses my little dot drawings. I learned those from one of my professors, and they came in very handy for illustrating books, making little dots. The quick and easy way is to put a transparent or tissue over a photograph and trace away, deciding what to include and what to leave out. And there's a very fast and easy way of doing illustrations. Next. The back cover, same dots. Next. This is one of the inside pages of the Danish proverbs. Again, illustrated with dot drawings all the way through. Next. Scottish proverbs, I think I did 5 of these altogether. Scottish proverbs, I drew all the illustrations. Next. Inside, I used 2 versions of Scottish calligraphy, so they're historically fairly accurate. Next. German proverbs, all calligraphy with antique initial letters and antique illustrations from Nuremberg Bible. Next. So the big letters that are drawn are that, but the little W at the top is an antique letter. Next. License to Cook New Mexico style, I collected, compiled, edited, illustrated, and had published by Penfield in 1989. And she still has it for sale on the website, although my data is out of date. Next. I liked this page, little dot drawings of fetishes and a couple local quotes. Next. And Finnish proverbs was the last one we did in 1990. Next. The inside again with dot drawings. About 3 kinds of calligraphy, 3 styles. Next. And in 2011, she had found an author, Arturo Medina, who had a collection of Mexican proverbs. So he translated them and I translated them again. So we had the literal translation and then kind of what it meant, like there's a parallel quotation in English. So we had 3 levels of language, the Spanish, the translation, and this is what you're more familiar with line. And in my little dot drawings, sometimes it just was fun. You know, how do you draw eggs? She wanted an illustration of eggs. Next. This section is about calligraphy, lettering, drawing, some of the things I do. The top center, the white with black and blue lettering is my cover for the college yearbook. Next. This is a black letter or Gothic calligraphy of all the names of the moon that I could find. And this is a reproduction, so I had it offset printed. Next. Escribiente did a alphabet book. And so people were assigned a letter to of the alphabet. I chose V. So how do you illustrate V for New Mexico? So I have volcanoes and vultures and the very large array. This was scratchboard. Next. Sometimes in my notebooks, I just doodle alphabets. That one is from 2017. I did bring my notebooks for the people who are local to be able to look through them and play with it. There's everything in those. Next. This is another playing with the alphabet. What I'm working on is the negative spaces, the negative shapes, because in graphic design, a negative shape is clearly at least as important as the positive shape. And if the negative shape is beautiful, the line will be beautiful. Next. I did some paintings in 2018. This was called Visual Language 1. And again, it's based on calligraphy. And it's also inspired by a painter in Iowa that I knew called Ulfert Wilkie. And he did these giant calligraphic paintings. And so I called it homage to Ulfert Wilkie. And now it comes out that, there's this debate in art about the honoring the artwork compared to or in contrast to honoring the person. So do I honor a dirty old man or do I honor his artwork? Next. This one is a smaller one, about 12 inches. And the next one is also a small one. And next, they were in a show for Escribiente. We had a 40th anniversary show of the calligraphy group in Albuquerque. So I entered my calligraphic paintings. Next. In my notebooks, I do a lot of Celtic interlace. And it's just my doodle, in the margins of notes and whatever. And the other is one of my favorite doodles, which is combining a grid with squiggles and alternating them how what gets dark and what gets light. Next. Some more notebook pages. These are crude enough that I haven't yet figured out to turn them into a zine or a coloring book, whatever, but they're really crude because they're done quickly. Next. We had a mail art project in was it in Libros? Was it in Escribiente? I don't remember. Anyway, this one is about the supermoon. So this is one side of the postcard, and those white spots are actually holes. I did it on mat board and punched holes through to represent the stars. Next, there's the front of it, and the holes match the O's in the address, and then some more. And at the time, I was kind of arguing with some of our instructions have been, don't add anything, don't make the page thicker, don't add anything. And so I said, how do I get dimension into a page when I can't add anything? Well, one way is to punch a hole in the page and you've got dimension. Next. This is some moderately recent calligraphy 2019. It's from a memorial book. Mita Saldaña and I have done a few books for people at a memorial service to sign in, but they have the information and so forth. So this is one of the recent calligraphy, and turns out I can still do it. I started in 1970 doing calligraphy. My professor was an excellent calligrapher at the University of Iowa. And then my next professor had studied with Lloyd Reynolds. You're familiar with the guy who brought calligraphy back to the United States. And so I had a couple of really beautiful teachers for calligraphy. And I don't know, I made up a theory that I was a monk in a previous life, because I could sit down and take my example all the way from the Romans all the way through most of the medieval period. And in a half an hour, I could do a reasonable facsimile of that calligraphy, no matter what the style. It's like that easy. So I was made the teaching assistant for calligraphy for the next 2 years. But it took me 4 years to conquer italic, because italic was one of the last ones in that historical chain. So now I can sit down and do italic, so I worked on it so long. Next. This is also 2019 with the Poets Picnic in Albuquerque. It's a day of poetry, reading, music, putting haiku and short nature poems on weathergrams and hanging them around the nature center. And so it's a lovely outing. And 1 year we took some of those same poems that people had submitted and made big banners out of it. So this was the banner I made, using different paper, splashed paper, then calligraphy, and feathers that are stitched on so that they stand out and are three-dimensional. And I chose that poem and chose to make it three-dimensional because the poet is Mary McGinnis, who you probably know here in Santa Fe. She is blind. So I wanted the banner to be something that she could relate to and feel and everything. So there's stitching, holding the different kinds of paper together, and the feathers that stick out, and her poem next.
Could you read the poem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next.
She's asking if you can read
Yeah,
the.
next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there we go.
There, I can read it. Good. Alone in winter, I can hear bird feathers alighting softly. So, more of my squiggles. This zine is from, or this, I'm sorry, this squiggles from 2016. And I've done so many of them. Next. They turned into a zine. So I had done these in 1992. I'd done these illustrations. And I was contemplating the wee bit of science that I understand, which was about, you know, quantum physics and the debate over whether something is an energy or a particle. And anytime they measure it for energy, it's energy, and if they measure it for particle, it's particle. And, you know, it was this great debate about what's real, how do you tell, how do you measure it, you know, all the interesting questions. So I had drawn these four things, thinking about quantum physics, but it didn't make any sense. And then a friend of mine showed me this quotation from Ruth Ozeki in her book, A Tale for the Time Being, Appendix B. And it was like the perfect quote to describe what I was describing visually. So I put them together and turned them into a zine. Next. I've done a bunch of things for free, just for fun. There are donations. The Habitat for Humanity store, the first version of it in Albuquerque. I really liked the manager. I knew somebody who worked there and everything. They had a fundraiser in which they had been given all these hard hats. And they said, if you're an artist and you want to do something with the hard hats, we'll sell them for a fundraiser. So I did a bunch. So this one, these are zip ties, little holes drilled in the hard hat and zip ties to make a punk hair hard hat. This one is called Happy Handyman Hat, in which I have miniature tools around it. And instead of a propeller on the top, which you put on a beanie, of course, this is a faucet handle, but it spins. And that one sold immediately. This lady bought it for us. This one is sprayed with spray paint that looks like rocks. And then I just drilled a whole bunch of holes through it and put in nuts and bolts. You know, just a statement. I don't know what it says. It's a statement. Okay. This one, I took a red hard hat and a red bottle from Drano and figured out how to cut the bottle up so that the spout became the nose and the bottom corners became ears and a whole bunch of zip ties and some tape, some sticky stuff tape. And it made Louis logo. Nice. There's my friend Jerry wearing Louis logo. Just fun things as a fundraiser for Habitat for Humanity. Next. Oh, this is the manager. She was retiring. She had this beautiful golden hair. So I made a hard hat, spraying it gold and using brass wire, more golden squiggles for her personally. Offsetter does annual fundraiser called Little House. So I've done those a couple times. They can give you, or you can start over. Give you this chunk of wood that's cut crooked and a triangular chunk of wood that's cut crooked. They glue it together and they say, do something with it. So it's really wonky. I added a piece of copper water line and some squiggles for smoke, and just made it a log cabin. Next. The next year I did, these are electrical boxes and it is lighted. There's a switch on the back. And if you, next, Batman's inside. Yeah. Anyway, just something silly. Next. I've been involved in several exchanges. My friend Daryl Harris likes to organize events and big exchanges, and so one of them, 2011, we did called the Book of Seasons. And so the idea was a print and a poem for each season. So the artists submitted whatever they submitted. We printed off a bunch, exchanged prints, so everybody had a different set of prints, made a book out of it, that kind of thing. And this Book of Seasons turned into a pretty big project. This is one of my seasons called Chili Ristra over Oregon Mountains. And I wrote a poem about the autumn and the snow coming in. This is pods from a tree over Pedernal. Next. This was an advertisement for the Book of Seasons. This showing of it, we actually had it in 4 books. This showing of it was at the Wyrick Gallery, and then later we did it at Gerald Peters Gallery here in Santa Fe a few years ago. Next. This is what they looked like: spring, summer, autumn, winter. Folios of each print and poem in each handmade box. So this was basically a bookbinding project at this time. Next. The next project that Dale organized is called Imprints a Poem. And again, it was print and poem. And so they put one of my woodcuts on the cover. And the book is leporello binding, which is a form of an accordion. I don't know if you've ever done leporello. It is tough to get those pages to line up. It looks like you just slap them together. No, they go off wonky. So leporello turned out to be one of the hardest bindings that we could do. Margie O'Brien sprayed our pages so that the pages had texture through them, and the edges of the pages had texture through them. So it's really a lovely book. Next. And it got its own box. And when it was displayed at Gerald Peters, we suggested people handle it with gloves. They didn't know, but that was the next. There's my other version of the woodcut inside. Now you notice the first one on the cover is tall. It was like 3 by 5, and this is like 4 by 4. So it's the same image cut 2 different ways on the woodcuts. And my poem about home like tree. Next. This project, this next section is books that were awarded Best of Show at the State Fair. So there's some of my favorite books, and somebody else liked it too. So I think that's nice. So I got a Best of Show at the State Fair in 2005 and 2006 as an amateur, the ordinary person, because I had studied bookbinding in 2001. So I wasn't all that experienced yet. But when I won Best of Show twice in a row, Mita, who runs the State Fair part, said, okay, now you're a professional. So I didn't win best of show until 2017 and 2018. Because then I was now competing with her and other people. So this was the first one, called Cervantes Journal. It was the 400th anniversary of the printing of Don Quixote. Our Libros annual library show, the librarians tried to get us to do the theme that the librarians had chosen for the year. That year was Cervantes because it was the 400th anniversary. And I'm one day thinking, okay, Cervantes comes up with this novel, his first novel, and it's this classic that's lasted 400 years. He must have been writing something before that. So I'm guessing that he had journals that he was writing in and doing bits and pieces. So then my next question was, well, if those journals were lost and found again 400 years later, what would they look like? So this silly question gave me months of work. The journals ended up being, the covers are made out of burnt corral board from a friend of ours. The pages are various kinds of laid paper in different colors. The calligraphy is the italic at the time because people in Spain, if they wanted to learn calligraphy or learn how to write, they went to Italy. So it was italic calligraphy. I wrote all the pages on my lap because I figured he didn't have the best setup for doing calligraphy. It's a journal, you know, you just scribble along. I figured the books had also gotten water damaged and the top was worn off, so the pages don't have any margin at the top, it's rotted off already. I made my imitation version of the ring binding. And what else? I did my own illustrations. Oh, the text is from Cervantes. I went online, University of Texas had Don Quixote in the Old Spanish. So I printed off pages and pages of it, figured out the difference between the Old Spanish and the New Spanish, and wrote in the Old Spanish so I kind of knew what I was writing, and just picked pieces of that Old Spanish Don Quixote to copy into the book. So page after page of Don Quixote. Then I got bored, so I started doing my own illustrations and my own descriptions of those. Next, that's the outside with a rotted off cover. It's the inside and page after page of, you know, antiqued paper. Next, some of the calligraphy, deliberately messy and bleeding from being wet. So I wrote about my friend, who I called the beautiful lady, and just drew her and described her where she lived near the aeropuerto in Albuquerque. Not that there wasn't an aeropuerto in Don Quixote's time. And this was my favorite drawing, the sheep going down the road raising a cloud of dust. Next. Next. The second best of show, it was called Oñate's Foot. Of course, I did this at the time, the famous controversy over the Oñate statue with his foot getting cut off. So this is a 2006, and this is how it looks displayed. A shoe form, of course, papered over with Spanish and Indian writing and symbols. The twister on the shoe form is blood red, of course. And the book is made with extra long covers with a slot in them so that it fits down over that middle of the shoehorn. So the text in this, I can't sell this book. The text is all copied off of newspaper articles and everything like that, it's all copyright. So I can't sell this book, but it was great fun to collect all these different viewpoints, information about Don Quixote, or about Oñate. Contemporary controversy or histories, not just in past. So it stands up like that. Next. One of the ideas for where that came from, I think, was from this book that I have of Lenore Tawney. She's one of my favorite assemblage artists. She was a weaver, and she was the first person to bring weaving off the loom and have it be three-dimensional. And that was in like in the 50s. And then she started doing assemblages and collages and stuff, and I just love her work. So this is one of the pieces that she did, and I had somewhere along the line had read her book, but you file the images back in your mind and you don't necessarily know where they came from or when you retrieve them. So later, I'm looking through Lenore Tawney's book again. I go, oh, I bet I swiped that idea from her. There's some more of her shoe forms. I just love them. Next. This is the third book that won Best of Show. This is called Reflections of Love. Yes, it's loaded on both sides with nails and sharp pointy tacks. And I spray painted it a little and things like that. It's just a little book about 4 by 5. Next. But I just thought it was fun. I'm not going to do it if it's not fun. Next. And this is the 2018 Best of Show called Paper Wasp Nest. And there are 2 forms of scrolls. I made the pack for it. There's a grapevine wreath that I made years ago. It had this box of grapevine wreaths, but it was like perfect because it fit exactly this paper wasp nest that I got from Iowa. My mentor in Iowa lived, one of her houses was next to a state park, and there'd be these giant wasp nests, like they're paper wasp nests, but they're giant. I like to think that, and they'd fall out of the tree once in a while. So they collected a couple of them. So I asked for some pieces. So inside the giant ball of paper wasp, there's like 4, maybe 5 layers of a regular beehive kind of looking wasp nest, the 6-sided little figures. So I rolled up scrolls, put them in those little holes. Now the scrolls are also tapered. So if you just make a regular paper bead, that's the same length all the way across, you get a square cylindrical bead. But if that paper is cut into a diagonal so that it's tapered, you have essentially a triangle of paper. You roll up from the top, the big end, down to the little end, you get a tapered bead. So those are tapered beads, which also were painted on the edge that it shows. And it reminds me of the wasp tails, so that was wasp. And then the bottom part is just a limited color of scrolls rolled up tight and set popping. But I don't know, it worked. Next. That's a close-up of the scrolls. You can see they're pointy. Next. Close-up of the tight glued scrolls, beads, whatever. This section is about some of my favorite books, and this one's called 3 by 3 by 3 by 3. A place where I worked had thrown out these perfectly wonderful wood blocks, which is in a few pictures. 3 inches cube oak wood blocks with advertising on them. So I said, well, can't throw out good material like that. So taking a hint from Dolph Smith, I carved on the wood blocks to give us some texture. You know, stained, varnished, all that. Used an old belt for, this is the closure side next. This is the spine side where the sections of artist canvas are stitched onto the belt. So it's sewn on tapes, essentially. Next. And 3 inches worth of canvas torn up and fringed. It takes a long time to fringe that stuff, you know. But it has to have fringe, you know. Next. Those were the wood blocks that I started. I still have a box of them. Next. This is the white book. This is in the annual show. I just gave them to y'all, so you could actually handle this one in person. And the inspiration was kind of like, well, one of my college roommates did a red book. So, well, okay, what else can you do? White book. So what white things can I find? Next. So common things in the kitchen. There were 6 items in the kitchen that I found that were white and little tubes to put them in. Bones and antler and ivory. Next. At the end of it is bird egg white. Thus ends the white book of common things. And it has little wooden eggs for the feet. Next. This is also one of my favorites, called Scroll Shrine. And again, the ideas come from a number of places. I have a liking for shrines, so I think about those a lot. I was doing scrolls. These scrolls are made out of an old textbook, and I don't know if it's Japanese or Chinese, but it was an old textbook I found at a yard sale, so I cut it up in strips and scrolled them up. Bamboo skewers. Put a little red on the end of the skewers just for some color. Next. The back side, the skewers go through. And that's how they're held into the scroll shrine. You'll also notice that the shrine is made out of beat up wood. It's just like scraps of stuff that I had around with 3 or 4 layers of paint. If you get enough layers of paint and sand back through them, it starts to look interesting. And to make it look Japanesey, I just rounded the corners. There's no actual upturned corners on those wood. They're just rounded from the bottom. Then I thought later, found out where this idea came from. Part of the scroll sticking through the back. Lenore Tawney, she did these boxes. She called them feather music. And she did a number of boxes with feathers, with the feathers sticking through the back of the box. I thought it was really cool. So that part of the idea got stored away in my brain and came out later in association with other things. Next. This is Lenore Tawney. Next. This is, I just have one picture of this, but it was at a friend's pool party. She had trumpet vines along the wall, and the seed pods had fallen on the ground. I looked at them. I look at everything like, can I make a book out of that? Everything. And I looked at those, I thought they'd make nice book covers. So there's a little book in there and some beads. And then how to bind it, it's a post. The brass wire is a post through the whole thing with a loop on the back to hang it up with. So that's my trumpet bind book. Next. This is called Nest. This is the front and back. We had a tree in our front yard that was shedding bark. It was half dead, shedding these big chunks of bark off of it. I again look at it, well, what can I do with this? Get for a book cover. Next. So this is the inside of the book, and it's about a nest, obviously. Old pages with a square hole punched through them from an old German textbook. Shreddings from the previous artist canvas. The spine and the interior pocket are denim. And this little booklet goes in the pocket. And it's nested in all the languages that I could click. And the eggs in the nest are Bennington marbles, which are antique pre-World War I marbles. So, you do with bark that falls off the tree, make a book out of it. Yes. This was the drawings in my notebook when I started planning the book. So there's a bunch of ideas that I didn't use and a bunch that I did. And so it gets thrown into the notebook and worked out. And I had to think about making miniatures for a long time. So this one had to be miniature, 3 by 3 by 3 or so. This was another notebook. What was this from? 2016 notebook. I was watching TV one day on History Channel, and they were doing this show about a castle off of Marseille, France, called Chateau d'If, D-I-F. And I was fascinated by the look of this thing. It was just like captivating me. I didn't know why, but I kept pausing the TV show and drawing. And so these are drawings that I did in 2023 for the Libros collaborative book, which theme was windows. When they said windows, I remembered that window with the crow in it from my sketchbook. So I redrew these to the size that was appropriate. The crow in the window, it says Chateau d'If, Marseille. And then I imagined what the inside of that dungeon looked like, looking out. Next. And looking out that window, what would the scene be like looking at Marseille? So I downloaded a whole gob of photographs about this whole thing. So then it turns out that Chateau d'If was the model for the Count of Monte Cristo book. And I had tried to read the Count of Monte Cristo in 8th grade. I got halfway through that 1,000-page book and I never got where the guy got free. But anyway, I think it was that resonated back when I saw this TV program with this dungeon and things in it. It was like captivating. So, you know, I never know what's going to captivate my attention, but this one did, and then it turned into the collaborative page. So the crow looks out. The page is flips over, so you can look at the page from both sides, inside and outside. So here we're inside looking out the window. Next. And here we're outside looking into the dungeon. So took 3 drawings, photoshopped the bars and everything twice, you know, easy stuff. And that turned into my collaborative book page. Next. One of the people that I ran into in looking at like the 500 artist books and 500 more artist books, 1,000 artist books, you know those, is a woman named Lisa Coken, California. Her family was seamstresses and tailors for centuries. And so she does these books using all the little parts and pieces that she's grew up with. And I just thought they were wonderful. Next. This is another one. It looks like little coils or little springs as the words on the page. Next. So I made a book using that idea. This is the cover. It's a food skewer through a loop. All handmade paper. Somebody gave me this beautiful handmade paper. What do I do with it? You know, it's fragile. It breaks easily. And next. So these are my pages of handmade paper using thread that's too short to do anything. You know how you've heard of orders who have a box of thread too short to use? That's what this is. I bookbinding a thread too short to use, but they become words on the page. Next. That's very cool. And so this is a very small book on this. Next. I mean, what fun is that? And the thread makes words on both sides of the paper first. And I had to put a reinforcing piece in the middle of where I tied it because that book is so fragile. Another one, maybe my best favorite is best book. It's called Duet. Title page. Outlandish fashion from a fashion magazine called W, Volume 1. Somebody told me they only printed two volumes of this book. They had such, I don't know where I found it, but it had such crazy fashion photography. It was like, you gotta be kidding me. You know, full pages, these weird things. So I went through the whole thing, tore it all up, and found faces that were similar size or close enough to the same size, sliced them up and switched alternate pieces. So now it made two different faces. Next. This one I cut into squares just because it worked better. But you know, he, she is both. Next. This one came out really cool and creepy. And what next to faces do people relate to but hands? So there were extra hands in this magazine. So I cut out extra hands to add them in here and there. Next. And that was the final piece that worked probably the best of any of them. And I used a little text. I gave credit to what fashion that was or whose it was. So there's a little bit of text in it, but it's incidental to these weird images. That book, Duet, came off of this collage that I did in 2004. I didn't plan for that to turn into a book, but I did this collage in 2004 because I had an assignment in the course I was in. Part of it was to describe visually two people in conversation. So when there's two people in a conversation, it's not two individuals anymore, it's the conversation. They mesh, they interblend. And so that's what this collage was about. But I liked the technique, so I got to use it again. The last couple pieces that I have are from the paper dolls. Gail Harrison, one of her many imaginations. In fact, when we were at the Gerald Peters Galleries, when the idea started, you were there. At the Peters Gallery, there was a very large paper doll that somebody had done, like almost life size, in a giant frame. And somebody said, "Oh, did you see the paper doll?" Somebody else says, "Oh, I always love paper dolls." Somebody else says, "Oh, I always love paper dolls too." And Dale says, "We have a theme for our next show." So 2 years it took to develop this. But when she proposed the theme, I started writing down every idea I could in my notebook. And so that's what that is. It's just brainstorming. Next. And that whole left-hand page is a whole nother brainstorming on paper dolls. Next. And another page of paper dolls as I went along. So one of those ideas turned out to be Venus at the beach. And again, it's just for fun. You know, I had this old wood, I made a box out of it. I found a beautiful beach scene. It was on the top of a candy tin. So I scanned it, blew it up, used that as the background, changed the words on the flags. And then I went off finding pictures of Venus, from Venus of Willendorf to Venus Williams. And everything in between, and anything I could call Venus. So it includes grandmother of a friend of mine, includes the lady on the left front standing up at the beach with her daughter with pearls, a hat, and white gloves. And you know, all the Venuses I could find. And they stand in an accordion, and there's a little flag, and there's birds suspended overhead for seagulls, and it's just for fun. And the last idea is the most complex piece I've done. I found this sketch. (2015) sketch, so before we were doing paper dolls. I was thinking surreal 3D dioramas. And this idea was the Happy Priest, 18th century. They always had these paintings of happy priests drinking wine. There's little wood carvings sitting in my window of a happy priest, you know, those things. And so then I thought, okay, happy priest, New Mexico Santos, a lot of them are hollow skirts. There's wood for body, head, arms, hands, but then the skirt was like muslin or muslin on a frame, painted or starched or both. And if you've seen any of those incomplete Santos, they're hollow. So that's why I was drawing this. So saying hollow skirt, Santos style, the priest in a robe, it rotates to show acolytes under his skirt, which explains his beatific smile. Next. Another piece I was thinking of was Our Lady of, I can't read the top word, but Our Lady of
Perpetual consumption?
Huh?
Perpetual,
that's it. Our Lady of Perpetual Consumption. You know, the craze on shopping, fighting. I mean, I go to Costco. I mean, this is absurd or what, how much stuff there is to buy. So this was a lady of perpetual consumption holding shopping bags with more shopping bags up on this shrine. Welcome to mass consumption, but the bottom of it is rotting because it's, you know, it's not built sustainably. Anyway, so I had all these ideas about that, and had a Nuestra Senora de Dolares, Our Lady of Dollars. So this is what I ended up with. And this is, as I said, a compilation of a great many ideas. So those that you saw. Another was that yes. There's a man who does, his artwork is to go into somebody's library and pick out books and stack them up, the titles of which make a short story. Okay, so if you have a lot of books, you could probably make your own short stories. So this is the book part, and So the titles of the book are the short story, Public Spies, Private Tears, which is the official title of this piece, The Laws of Our Fathers, Abuse of Power, Papal Sin, and Deliver Us from Evil. So that's the story. I made the shrine out of beat up wood. Obviously, it's a church shrine. It's to say the decay. Next. So here's the priest and his holy hands. And the innocents. We call them the innocents. I have a large collection of old photographs. And I had a whole bunch of these that had children in their first communion outfits. So I got those. I borrowed a few from friends who had their own pictures. The priests are represented by a Rolodex. Because I said to one of my friends, how do I show how many priests are involved in all of this? So amongst the pages here, there's a list of over 200 priests in New Mexico who have been accused of molestation. Now, very, very few get sent to court. Very, very few. Church covers it up. So there's a lot. But the one that I had up here, oops. Father Gagan was the first, not the first. He was one of the few who ever got sent to prison. And that's him, so I leave him up. That's the bishop that covered up for him. And that from the grave. Father Gagan got actually sent to prison, whereupon he was promptly beaten to death by another inmate who had been molested by a priest. It's the only time I'd heard of justice being served. So here we are with the priests, the praying hands, and the innocents. Is there anything else? So they're the paper dolls. And they all are holding a little rosary. So that's my rant turned into a reader.
Bravo.
So we are